says that immediately after the tribulation of those days, shall the sun be dark and the moon shall not give its light, and then shall all the tribes in the world mourn, and they shall see the sign of the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven, and he would gather together his elect from the four winds of heaven. What the dispensational teaching has done with that is they had taught that the elect are the Jews. I would argue against that for a few reasons. Romans chapter 8 says, who shall lay anything against God's elect? It is God who justifies. Who is the elect Paul's talking about? He's talking about believers. Doesn't Paul in Ephesians talked about that we are elect, chosen, or Peter, maybe it's Peter that says we are elect and chosen. He begins quoting Old Testament. Just look up the word elect and do a New Testament run on it. And yes, elect are the Jewish nation, but the elect also includes non-Jews who have been grafted into the tree through Messiah, through Christ, believers, the church. And Jesus clearly teaches in John chapter 10 that even though he's got a fold of the Jews, he says, I have sheep, other sheep, which are not of this fold, them I must bring in also. And then there should be one flock and one shepherd. Why would God divide his sheep? Why would he come for a portion of it and let the Jews go through the tribulation, this time of Jacob's trouble, and he takes most of us who are primarily Gentiles with him before the tribulation, but he lets the Jews just go through it. Who's doing all the preaching? What is the purpose of Revelation? Why the warnings in Jesus' teachings about persecution and taking up your cross and dying for him and being hated of all men for his name's sake? Why all this? Why telling us about the abomination of desolation? Why does he tell his disciples if they're not going to be here? Why is the warning or the exhortation in Revelation chapter 1 verses 1 through 3 that the man who reads these prophecies, who hears them and keeps the things in them, is blessed, if most of the book don't relate to you? What's also used is the Church of Philadelphia, I believe it is, that is promised to be kept from the hour of tribulation, or that shall come upon the whole world. And if you read the book, think about this. This is a promise to a church in Asia that today no longer exists. Is that how God kept them from the hour of tribulation that came upon the whole world? If you read those verses as progressive time periods of the church, going from dark ages to all the different ages to the Laodicean church age, you're really missing the point. They're actually written to literal churches. There are promises that I believe they're applicable from all the churches to the present day church. Warnings. We could be a church that's Ephesus, like Ephesus, lost our first love. Any church. We could be a church that is like Philadelphia, where there is no rebuke against us. But this is the clear thing, is that the Church of Philadelphia that was in existence at the time no longer exists today. And probably what he really was warning them that he was going to keep them from was the oppression of the Romans at that time, which was considered would be widespread. He may have preserved these little groups there. But does that a promise that applies to all believers? Jesus promises persecution. The other thing we need to think about is John chapter 17, where Jesus prayed, I pray not, Father, that you would take them out of the world, but that you would guard them or protect them, preserve them from the evil one. Don't take them out of the world. Guard them, protect them from the evil one. But the real problem comes with the latter parts of Revelation. Revelation, I believe it's chapter 20, where at the end of the tribulation and the millennium begins to happen, that Satan is bound for 1,000 years. And it says that the rest of the dead did not live. But it says, blessed and holy is he who takes part in the first resurrection, whom the second death has no power. This term is called the first resurrection. But when does this first resurrection happen? It happens after the tribulation, as the millennium is approaching, is beginning. This is called the first resurrection. Well, according to the preacher Rapture screen, there is a resurrection and rapture that happened 7 years earlier. Wouldn't that be the first resurrection? Here's the other contradiction. You got a trumpet after the last trumpet. You have a resurrection before the first resurrection, clearly contradicting the scriptures. Taking the tares out first is what the scripture says. The dispensational theme says takes the wheat out first. Does not fit the scriptures, does not fit the biblical scheme.